healthy church, and it was the first church after the day of Pentecost. This church was not a perfect church since it was made up of people like our churches today. But God was at work in their midst. As we have seen, Acts is the record of what Jesus continued to do and to teach through his people after his ascension. On the day of Pentecost, he called to himself 3,000 souls. Now we read, the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. Acts 2:47. Jesus Christ himself was at work in this church. This snapshot shows us the marks of a healthy church so that we can measure ourselves by it and seek to follow its example. A healthy church, according to our text, is marked by continual devotion, first to the Lord, second to his people, and third to his work in the world. So we have here two questions. The first one is, how can we understand diaconia in the early church according to our text and in other texts through the Bible? And considering our text, what should be our role in order to help the churches in need, especially during difficult times? I invite all of you in your tables and in groups to discuss it for 5 to 7 or 8 minutes. Thank you. I gave them again the text. How can we understand diaconia in the early church? I sent you two files today. One is the text and the question. And the other question, considering our text, what should be our role in order to help the churches in need, especially during difficult times? Did you see it? Thank you. So, if we are done, I would like to hear one or two comments on each question. Yes, please. We are not hearing you. I think some steward should turn it on. They will turn it on for you. They are not hearing you.
So,
Please.
when you go closer to God, you realize that everything belongs to God. And you are ready sharing this with the other people. And as we're Council of Churches today, we have to remember also the suffering people. And St. Paul, after preaching, as you said, the gospel for salvation, then he asked his brothers where they could afford to do collections to help the needy people. But the most important, why the people who receive the message of Christ, as you told us, immediately they started selling their things and sharing them with the people who they didn't have. It's not necessary to sell your car and your house. But remember that myself, when I live in Africa and I see a child die in Zimbabwe, they die 100 children every day because they don't have water, food, and medicine. I feel guilty. I feel that I fail. So WCC has to think in this way. And in the executive, we know that we can get loans here 1% to build buildings. But my brothers and my youth living in this country suffering of poverty, they have to pay 20 and 25 and 30. We are looking for social justice, and this is our way also to have hope for our salvation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Somebody else would like to share a comment with us? Thank you. So today our text is talking about a healthy church. And as we notice, a healthy church is marked by continual devotion to the Lord. And we can see their continual devotion to the Lord in different ways. First, devotion to the Lord means devotion to the teachings of his word. The text read, they were continually devoted to the apostles' teachings, 2:42. While 3,000 new converts all at once would be any pastor's dream, it also would be any pastor's nightmare. These people were from many different locations and backgrounds. While most of them had some biblical backgrounds, they were ignorant about the person and ministry of the Lord Jesus. So, the apostles had a massive job on their hands to ground these people in their new faith before they returned home. They must have done with these people what Jesus recently had done with them, beginning with Moses and with all the prophets. They explained to them the things concerning Jesus in all the scriptures. We live in a day where the church often minimizes sound doctrines. When you turn to the last 3 letters that Paul wrote to his younger pastors, Timothy and Titus, you find him emphasizing again and again the need for sound doctrines. In his final appeal to Timothy, just before his martyrdom, Paul gives the strongest possible admonition. I solemnly charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word. And he goes on to warn Timothy that the time will come when people will not endure sound doctrine, but will accumulate teachers who tell them what they want to hear. A healthy church must be devoted to sound doctrine, because God has chosen to reveal himself in a written word. If we are not continually growing to understand and apply the doctrines of God's word, we are not growing in devotion to the Lord. Second, devotion to the Lord means devotion to communal worship. The preaching of God's word should result in worship, in that it should bring us to an encounter with God himself, which is the heart of true worship. But in addition to the apostles' teaching, there are several other aspects of worship that we see here in our text. The Lord's Supper. They were continually devoting themselves to the breaking of bread, 2:42, which refers to the Lord's Supper. I have heard people say if you celebrate communion too often, it becomes routine. But Bible reading and prayer can also become routine if you do them every day. I hope that we don't read our Bibles and pray less often so that they don't become routine. The solution is not to decrease the frequency, but rather to ask God to shake us out of our spiritual dullness. The Lord's Supper should remind us of the greatest truth in the world, that the Son of God loved us and gave himself for us so that we could be forgiven and reconciled to God. It should make us examine our lives so that we confess and turn from any sin. Prayer. Literally, the text reads, they were continually devoting themselves to the prayer. It refers to set times of communal prayer whenever and wherever the church meets, whether in a large meeting in the temple or from house to house. We need to always pray. In your personal and family life, prayer ought to be a normal, frequent response when a personal problem arises or when you talk about someone who is facing a problem. Prayer acknowledges our total dependence on the living God. Praise and joy. They were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart. 246. Their lives were marked by joy because of what the Lord Jesus had done for them on the cross. Praising God, 247, is a present participle, pointing to the ongoing common expression of praise to God. It no doubt marked their communal times of worship, but it also oozed out of the cracks of their daily lives, drawing others to the source of their joy. Second, a healthy church is marked by continual devotion to the Lord's people. And I think this is very important, and it touches our maybe today's subject, talking about diaconia. We have to be devoted to the Lord's people. They were continually devoting themselves to the fellowship, 242. We cannot be devoted to the head, who is Jesus Christ, and at the same time cut ourselves off from the body, which is his church. The Bible commands us not to abandon assembling together with other believers. There are many verses in the Bible that exhort us to bear with one another and to forgive each other, since we often offend and, of course, get offended. What does it mean to be devoted to the fellowship? A Greek word, and you know better than me, koinonia, means to share in common. So to have fellowship, we must be together. You cannot have fellowship if you don't gather with the church. Some people object to large churches as being too impersonal, and we see this in America. Those who are from America, they know better than me. But please observe that when the Lord started the church, he started it big. It began with 3,000 souls, and soon it numbered over 5,000, and it kept growing from there. While we should gather with the whole church for worship and teaching, we only enjoy deep fellowship with those we get to know personally. To have fellowship, we must share together in the things of God. Too often, Christians get together and spend the whole time talking about news, weather, and today's subject, it's the Mondiale, the soccer. It is not wrong to talk about these things, but at some point, the conversation needs to move to a deeper level. If the Lord and his salvation are at the center of my life and of yours, when we get together, we will talk about him. If we don't, it may reveal that he doesn't have the proper place in our lives. To have fellowship, we must share together in material things. Back to our text, we can see the situation in Jerusalem, and it was really somewhat unique. Thousands of pilgrims had traveled there for the Feast of Pentecost. Many had followed Jesus after Peter's message, and they wanted to stay longer to get grounded in their new faith. They needed hospitality and financial help to do this. So, to be able to meet these needs, the church opened their homes to help the needy. Some even sold land and donated the proceeds through although this was not required. Before we say, but this doesn't apply to me, we need to remember that we are all exhorted to be generous and ready to share with those in need. Let them do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. 1 Timothy 6:18. We are told not to share with a lazy or irresponsible person who refuses to work. 2 Thessalonians 3:6-12. If we have this world's goods and see our brother in need and close up our hearts against him, we should question whether God's love abides in us or not. And finally, a healthy church is marked by continual devotion to God's work in the world. Our text does not say that the church was devoting itself to evangelism, but the fact is it was happening, and it did not happen apart from these new believers sharing their faith with those who did not know Christ. Some of the evangelism took place through the miracles that the apostles were performing. We can see it in Acts 2:43, and the preaching that accompanied these miracles, 3:1-26. I wish you all the best during our second day, and this Bible study was talking a little bit about a healthy church. And as you know, a healthy church should always be devoted, as I mentioned, to the Lord, to the fellowship and worship, and of course to the Word. And I think this is our mission as the Central Committee and as the World Council of Churches. May the Lord be praised, and may the Lord bless all of you. Thank you very much.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you have shown us the meaning of generosity in the beautiful diversity of creation, in the overflowing love of Jesus Christ, in the never-ending gift of the Holy Spirit. You have abundantly blessed us and called us to be a community that honors each other, to serve others with joy, to share our love and material possessions. Enable us to rejoice in what we have been given, in what is yours to give, and lead us always in the way to Jesus Christ, our servant Lord. Amen.
We still have some minutes. I want to use this to rehearse a song, one song for tomorrow. We are going to worship with the congregation of St. Pierre Cathedral. So this is one song that I think not so familiar for some of us or many of us in this place. So the melody goes like this. Let's try to sing. God has formed the church to be sign of Christ throughout the world. Many peoples, many tongues, in one body reconciled. One Lord is our unity. One faith is our only rock. Baptized fully into Christ, His life flows out through us all. Wonderful. Can we try the refrain again, please? One Lord is our unity. One faith is our only rock. Baptized fully into Christ, His life flows out through us all. Wonderful. From the beginning. God has formed the church to be sign of Christ throughout the world. Many peoples, many tongues, in one body reconciled. One Lord is our unity. One faith is our only rock. Baptized fully into Christ, His life flows out through us all. God has called to do God's will. Faith grows strong when proved by works. People sharing myriad gifts find one love, one peace in Christ. One Lord is our unity. One faith is our only rock. Baptized fully into Christ, His life flows out through us all. Now the church in every place holds all ends of hope aloft, where the Spirit makes them light. They will shine good. I hear very nice, good, wonderful voices of altos, tenors, basses, and of course sopranos. So please, 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 Central Committee members, join in the choir rehearsal at 1 o'clock to 1:45, and after that you can have lunch without any lines, without queuing. And then, if you are not Central Committee members and you want to join in the choir that's supporting our morning prayers, you are welcome to rehearse during the coffee hours, the first or the morning coffee and tea breaks. And of course, Central Committee members are also invited to do so, to join in the choir that supports the daily prayer, the morning prayer. So I think we can conclude our morning prayer and Bible study, and thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Are you a healthy Central Committee? Then let us stand up. Let's stand up a little bit. Okay, find some space. As we invite the plenary on ecumenical diaconia and sustainable development, we would like to thank the team for the prayer this morning and the wonderful Bible study that reminds us of our healthy state as a believer and as a church. We have something that we would like to check with you. After consultation yesterday, we felt that as a Central Committee, as a council, as an ecumenical movement, we are celebrating 70 years, and we need a statement together that goes out of this Central Committee to the wider community about this 70-year celebration. This is different from the public issues. So I'd like to see your cards if you accept that we issue a statement about our celebration. The message, it's not a statement, a message. Thank you for the correction, Your Eminence. It's a message of the Central Committee. We have some proposals of who could be in that small drafting committee. Yes?
During the last meeting, or the first meeting of the Central Committee after the Busan, we appointed some moderators. And these moderators, we trust in this ministry because they are the voice of all the member churches. And I propose the moderators who are here present of the commissions to help us in this direction. And because I'm working for the last years with the moderator for the Commission on Christian Education and Ecumenical Formation, I propose also to preside this special draft committee on behalf of the members of the Central Committee. Thank you.
Yes, that's a proposal. Thank you for that proposal. If we were to use all the moderators of the commissions and reference groups, that will be quite a huge group. But we were of the opinion, if it's acceptable to the Central Committee, that we have a small group. Let me just test the mind of the House, if it's acceptable. We thought we would have the member of the Central Committee, Miriam. I don't know if she's here. We've not quite asked them. Yes, Miriam. We would ask Metropolitan Vasilius. I'm not sure if he's in the room yet. Metropolitan Vasilius. The brother. We also wanted to co-opt Reverend Dr. John Jibo. I don't see him here. But perhaps in that respect, Your Eminence, if we could then, if the moderator of Faith and Order is here, we could ask her to serve on that group. That is Susan Daba, is she here? Yes, so she could be on that group. We have a name that has just skipped my name, from Korea. We are also trying to balance, if you allow us, please, Your Eminence. I'll just check with the General Secretary. We have a name from Korea that we would like to have on that group. So that will be the small group. And if it is acceptable to you, I'll bring the name as soon as the General Secretary steps in of the person from South Korea. Can I see your cards? This group has to work extensively so that the message comes back to you, at least the draft and then the final. So thank you so much. I see no blue card. I will try to consult on the final name. Could we then ask the moderator and the team on the ecumenical diaconia to step forward, or whatever arrangement they have? This is a plenary on diaconia, ecumenical diaconia and sustainable development. Welcome.
Muy buenos días para todos. Hablaré en español, así que por favor, hacer uso de sus audífonos. Este primer plenario, en esta mañana, como nos ha dicho nuestra moderadora, es sobre el desarrollo de la diaconía y la sostenibilidad. Les presentaremos el documento de diaconía ecuménica, que es el resultado de la cooperación continua entre el Consejo Mundial de Iglesias y la Alianza AD. Por lo tanto, quiero en este momento agradecer al doctor Rudelmar Bueno de Faría, secretario general de AD Alliance, haber aceptado la invitación y estar aquí presente en este plenario. También quiero agradecer la presencia de 3 personas que nos harán una presentación de la diaconía desde sus iglesias y el desarrollo sostenible en Latinoamérica y en Asia Noreste. Nos presentará voy a esperar unos segundos, tal vez minuto, porque hay personas que no tienen sus audífonos. Muchas gracias. Les explicaba que tendremos este plenario sobre diaconía ecuménica y desarrollo sostenible. Lo trabajaremos en 3 momentos. En un primer momento tendremos la participación del doctor Rudelmar Bueno de Faría por el acompañamiento que hacemos entre el Consejo Mundial de Iglesias y Ad Alliance. Y nos presentará el documento sobre diaconía ecuménica el doctor Tiel Ahanon Yabrayesus. Así, y luego, en un segundo momento, escucharemos 3 presentaciones desde Latinoamérica y el Asia Noreste. En una tercera parte tendremos la presentación de parte de la Organización Mundial de la Salud con el doctor Tedros, y él entonces nos estará haciendo una presentación de cómo podemos seguir trabajando en conjunto el Consejo Mundial de Iglesias y la Organización Mundial de la Salud. Quiero pedir entonces al doctor Thiel hacer su intervención de 10 minutos para este plenario.
Good morning, sisters and brothers. Microphone. Okay, thank you. Good morning, sisters and brothers. It's my privilege to present the document, and I think you have all received it on your table. I'm not going to present the document as a whole, but giving some background information and about its aims and how we hope it will be used. Now, how do I proceed? Where should I point? To whom? Yeah, there it is. I just want to point to the fact that diaconia is a long-standing commitment within the ecumenical movement and within the life of the World Council of Churches. This was already a part of the platform that was established in Amsterdam when the WCC was started in 70 years ago. At that time, refugee was the main issue that filled the concern of diaconia. Later, it was also widened up to development work and advocacy, public witness. And together with the praxis of diaconia, within the ecumenical movement, there has always been also a critical and innovative reflection on diaconia. And Larnaca in 1986 on diaconia was a very important step forward in that process. Next, please. Parallel with the World Council of Churches, there has also been agencies, related agencies, that has accompanied the World Council of Churches in its diaconal work. And there has been a move perhaps from the multilateral diaconia that was initiated by from the Division of Interchurch Aid and Service to Refugees from the beginning to Sicarus, and towards a bilateral praxis of diaconia. But with the establishment of ACT Alliance new effort was given to the multilateral approach to diaconia, trying to bring churches and agencies together within the framework of the ecumenical movement to continue their task. Next, please. When the WCC met at Busan in 2013, a lot of documents related to the understanding of diaconia. One important document was the one from Colombo on theological perspectives on diaconia in the 21st century, but also the Faith and Order document on the church had a clear understanding of the church as a servant church, and a church that is sent to the world caring for the well-being and the human dignity of all creation. During the meeting in Busan, one of the ecumenical conversations dealt with diaconia under the title Compelled to Serve, Diaconia and Development in a Rapidly Changing World. And there some issues came up about certain difficulties in the understanding of diaconia, and also perhaps some tensions between the role of agencies and the role of local churches. It was lifted up there. Now, the invitation to participate in the pilgrimage of justice and peace gave a new opportunity of reorienting the understanding of diaconia and the joining in, working together also ecumenical diaconia. Next, please. But the tensions that came up mainly had two elements. One was this, in what way does diaconia, as performed by the agencies, relate to the churches? Will they have as kind of a duty to work together with the churches when they are performing their work in a certain countries? Or can they just bypass the churches? Some criticism came up saying that not always the agencies had in mind a close cooperation with the churches. And the other issues, how would the agencies, after all, understand their work? Would they understand it as development work, as a professional work, very similar to what any development agency would do? Or was there any distinctiveness about the work performed by the agencies? And that was very much discussed at the Malawi meeting in 2014, which ended up with a proposal that the WCC and ACT Alliance jointly should develop a document that clarifies our joint understanding of ecumenical diaconia and articulate who we are and what we are to do, in order that we have a common platform, whether we come from a church in Africa, in Europe, wherever in the world, or whether we represent the agencies or the diaconal specialists. Can we establish a common platform where we say, this is how we understand who we are and what we do together, and also something on how we do it? So there are two, and the document is now ready, and this is a document that you have at hand, and where you will be asked to act, to respond to this document. The document has two basic approaches. On the one hand, it contains a theological approach, trying to understand diaconia based on biblical and theological principles, and also regarding the history of the church, how the church from the very early beginning has been involved in diaconia. On the other hand, there is also a practical approach, describing how churches are engaged in action, and also trying to respond to the new phases of poverty, of working together in today's world. So the difficulty of this document has been holding together the theological part and the practical part. And somebody would say there is too much practical things here with development goals and all those things. Others would say there is too much theology. But we hope that the point of the document is holding those perspectives together. You may remember that the Executive Committee commended the document in 2017, and now the document is ready at your hand. I'm not going into every chapter, just pointing to some very important issues. In the first chapter, we try to define what the understanding of ecumenical diaconia. And it presents diaconia as faith and rights-based action. I think that is one of the basic principles of the document. Seeing the relationship between being faith-based and rights-based, and claiming that there is no contradiction between the two. They are affirming each other mutually. And when we say rights-based, we say that this is also a theological perspective. There is a move from vocation, vocatio, to advocacy, ad vocatio. There is no vocation that does not bring us to the other. And from ad vocatio, there is also a link to provocatio. Diaconia may in some situation be understood as critical and would lead to residence. But the deepest understanding of provocation is that new light, new insight, and new hope is being seen and taken. And I think in that understanding, diaconia, ecumenical diaconia, is an integral part of the pilgrimage of justice and peace. Next, please. The second chapter says something important about the history of the ecumenical diaconia. Looking at the paradigm shift of ecclesial dimension, holistic dimension, prophetic dimension. Chapter 3 portrays diaconia in today's polycentric ecumenical movement from the perspective of the margins. Fourth, theological reflection on diaconia. I have only 2 minutes left, so I have to go quickly. Chapter 5 on the changing landscape of diaconal action, referring to the Agenda 2013, and I think Rudelmar will go more into that. And chapter 6 may be the new chapter for you, where you haven't reflected so much before, where we talk about the distinctiveness of diaconal action. Where is its identity? And then chapter 7, contemporary challenges. And the last chapter, where we also will ask you to act, react and act, is understanding this situation where we are now as a Kairos document, as a Kairos moment that calls for affirming diaconia as a shared vision and strengthen our structures and networks. Finally, and this is my last point, I think this is the moment to look at ecumenical diaconia as a strategic moment, in the sense that it develops a shared platform for action, for all of us, for all churches and related agencies, for action and language, for communication. And by that we may overcome asymmetries and empower churches and diaconal agents for joint action. That is the first advantage point. And the second is in relation to the public arena. We may together affirm our distinct identity, assets and competence, and thereby show our role within civil society. And thirdly, the third point is that in relation to unity, diaconia continues to be a pillar of ecumenism. It has always been. And the table of diaconia as a table of inclusing, of sharing and transformation may also help us as churches to open our hospitality also in related to other dimensions of being church. May God help us with that. Thank you so much for your attention.
Muchas gracias, doctor Thiel. Nos ha dado un recorrido por el proceso que hemos dado como Consejo Mundial de Iglesias para llegar a este documento, pero también el contenido tan importante del documento. Quisiera ahora presentarles entonces al doctor Rudelmar de Faría, secretario general de Ad Alliance.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. For me, it's a pleasure, but also an honor to be speaking to the Central Committee members on a very close to my heart issue, diaconia. And as Chell mentioned, in terms of the historical engagement of churches and ecumenical organizations to come up with this document, I think that I would like to emphasize a little bit looking ahead. And also that we have a new moment for ecumenical diaconia. not only because WCC and ACT Alliance needs to come together and to coordinate our diaconal actions in line with global processes such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, but because we as ACT have to leverage our Christian identity and live out our values, our Christian values, because we need to exercise our uniqueness as faith-based organizations to promote justice and inclusion. And we know that the world has changed. It's become much more complex than ever, and that is happening every day. We are experiencing increasing polarization and also populism everywhere, in every corner of the world. And you know that our countries are not exempted of that. And all this is creating and also dividing our families, our churches, and also our societies. The world is facing basically a change of era. And this change of era is basically based on a crisis of values. Yesterday, we heard what is happening with our fellow brothers and sisters in the Philippines, Nigeria, Cameroon, Nicaragua, South Sudan, Syria, Palestine, Myanmar, and many other countries. And the reason and the basis for this basically are issues related to the crisis of values. Humanity seems to be splitting into two groups. The one that promotes inclusion of all human beings as created at image and likewise of God, and also seeing this as migrants, women, indigenous people, vulnerable populations. They are the people created at image of God. And there is another group that basically look for segregation, individualism, discrimination, and exclusivity. And these are often based on economic interests, but also economic principles. If you will go to the root causes of these problems that you are facing in many of our places, basically they are very much related to that. But also as a result of this crisis of values, we now see a realignment of forces within our societies, where even churches are associating themselves with populist politicians, political parties, and economic groups that promote agendas that undermine human dignity. Our sister from Indonesia mentioned yesterday the politicization of religion taking place everywhere. But also the religionization of politics is something that is present in our lives today. We are facing a loss of a stable conception of humanity and the human being. The human rights framework is under attack, and even we have some groups promoting an alternative framework for human rights, including values that are not Christian values. And it seems that humanity forgot why the Human Rights Convention was adopted 70 years ago, after the Second World War, when you saw a lot of atrocities and subsequent others everywhere in the planet. So, with all these scenarios, what is the role for us as churches and also faith-based organizations as ACT Alliance? We know that religions orients the lives and important decisions of many families and communities on a strong base of values. With these holistic worldviews, religions continues to challenge the development of economic and political subsystems that dominate societies, while undermining and fragmenting life in communities. Historically, churches have played a prophetic role in society, in some situations even shaping global and political agendas to highlight values of inclusion and human dignity in the public square. And we have many examples of that. The theology of liberation in Latin America, the role of the ecumenical movement and the churches against apartheid in South Africa and the liberation in many regions. That's are very good. However, over the last decade, the prophetic voice of the churches and the ecumenical movement and ecumenical organizations has been a little bit silent or not loud enough, especially in times when the people need the most for orienting their actions, but also to supporting their struggle. As the world is changing in many ways, so is also the role of diaconia. When churches engage in diaconia, they engage by drawing from mission of God, who is the God of life. And this engagement requires actions to support the most vulnerable and the marginalized in our societies, in our communities, but also to stand up and uphold justice. So Christian witness and Christian services needs to be hand in hand. And they entail responding concertedly to the challenges posed by the world today, being poverty, socioeconomic inequalities, and also ecological destruction, thereby contributing to the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted by the United Nations in 2015, recognizing that that is not a platform only for UN, it's for the humanity. And the churches and ecumenical organizations have participated and contributed to elaborate these Sustainable Development Goals. From the perspective of ecumenical diaconia, the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, provide an important platform for action, a political and transformational framework to address many of the root causes of issues that are diminishing people's life and also damage God's creation. Transformation is clearly a process, but at the same time it envisions the achievement of certain goals, arriving at a new situation where human dignity is more respected, with peace and justice for more people, not the contrary. Transformation, however, cannot happen if it is not based on principles and values. If it is conducted from top down, it may be initiated by the people and the communities. Churches and diaconal organizations and institutions, including ACT Alliance members, have an important and enormous responsibility to advance diaconia, both as a public service and a public witness to respond to the challenges and threats which are undermining life and putting God's creation at risk. Many churches and diaconal structures have vast experiences in working humanitarian response and engagement in action-oriented activities. And I'm sure that each one of your churches and your organizations have a lot of experiences coming back from many, many years since your establishment. So there is a potential for us to work on situations and processes for prophetic and political engagement of churches and diaconal institutions in the public realm. Likewise, the wider ecumenical movement, and I do not refer only for those organizations that are in this building, but all the global communions, the regional ecumenical organization, the National Council of Churches, we need to come together to strategically set up a platform to leverage ecumenical diaconia as a motivational tool to jointly promote inclusion, leverage the gifts and expertise of the different churches, as well as to establish a strategic partnership with other religions, multilateral organizations, including the UN and even the private sector. Those who are fighting for inclusion and also the common good, not those who are against that. The increasing recognition of the role of religion in development also represents an opportunity for diaconia. We know that religion is top on the agenda in all the political processes, governments, and the UN. For diaconal institutions, this represents a unique possibility of building alliances with people of faith and with religious communities, affirming their hopes and distinct assets. In addition, it affirms the distinctive identity and competence of the faith-based actors and adds energy to the commitment to save lives and struggle for justice. Although churches and ecumenical organizations have significant experience in humanitarian development and advocacy actions, as I mentioned, they will not make any substantial changes in humanity if they work alone or in competition. And we have competition in our ecumenical movement. Therefore, there is a need to intentionally work together to equip churches and ecumenical organizations to better understand the different dimensions of diaconia and create tools and strategies that support the ecumenical diaconia as the way forward. And the Ecumenical Diaconia document that was presented by Chell, it's a great step to help both WCC and the ACT Alliance to work closely, recognizing our distinctive contributions, using the SDGs as a platform to practical ecumenical diaconia. However, that is not enough. We have to further understand the theological rationale of our common work and build up on our Christian identity and motivation to act together. And the document also provides hints for us to work on that. ACT has its assembly taking place now in October in Uppsala, Sweden, but we are not waiting until there to start to address some critical points in the life of the Alliance, including issues related to our identity and also our core mandate as a faith-based organization, as action by churches together. We are changing our policies to ensure that our Alliance is driving by national forums, that the role of national organization and national leadership are at the center, and that the National Council of Churches have a permanent invitation to be part of the discussions in the ACT forums, that we work on issues related to diaconia and development intentionally. Many work has still to be done, and you have opportunity to discern the best way to do it. However, the first step is to recognize ourselves as part, I mentioned ACT Alliance, as part of one ecumenical movement and work as part of it. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos a Rudel Mar esta presentación, donde nos presenta la visión de ACT Alliance y la invitación para que sigamos trabajando conjuntamente de una manera colaborativa con el Consejo Mundial de Iglesias. Queremos agradecer entonces al Dr. Thiel y al Dr. Rudel Mar sus presentaciones. Hagámoslo con un aplauso para los dos. E invito seguidamente al Dr. Marcelo Schneider, quien nos hará la presentación de 3 contextos diferentes, desde Latinoamérica y Asia nororiental.
I'm from the communications department of the WCC, and we, as planning this plenary, thought it will be interesting to break the reflection on ecumenical diaconia and the association with the Sustainable Development Goal, listening to a few testimonies from you. And we selected 3 members from the Central Committee. I would like to invite them to come over now. Reverend Cora Matamoros, please, from the Moravian Church of Nicaragua. Reverend Young Ju Bae from the Presbyterian Church in the Republic of Korea. And Mr. Thomas Kang from the Evangelical Church of Lutheran Confession in Brazil. I will be informally interviewing them on what is going on in the context that they live, relating to the issue of service. How are the churches engaged in the service, not because the SDGs have been launched a few years ago, but because of the nature and because of what Chell mentioned as a faith and rights-based approach to what we want for this world to be a better place. And I will start asking Reverend Yoon-Ju Bae here on a recent consultation that we had there in the Republic of Korea on the Ecumenical Diaconia document and your participation on that. And if you could just unfold from that event on how your church and the churches around you there are involved in that agenda.
Thank you. A consultation on the Ecumenical Diaconia document and study guide was hosted by the NCCK, and it was held in Seoul last December. And Shell was a speaker, and the ACT Alliance was represented by its Asia Pacific staff, Mr. Anup Sukumaran. And the participants came from Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, and Korea. Their feedback was very positive. They welcomed the document, reaffirming the centrality of diaconia to the nature and mission of the church, and also to the Christian discipleship. They were willing to translate it in their own languages for a wider audience. Concerning the study guide, they found it very helpful, But at the same time, they proposed a kind of indigenization of the study guide, addressing and reflecting the diverse local contexts and their own specific situation in Northeast Asia. In other words, a kind of bottom-up approach was suggested because only through the encounter and interaction with concrete local contexts, the document can come alive. If I focus on Korean churches, they are very active in the diaconal service, especially during the military dictatorship before democratization. There were few NGOs, and the social welfare was not on the main agenda of our government. At the same time, at that time, Korean local churches were one of the major communities providing the care for the weak and the service for the most vulnerable and marginalized of the society. Progressive churches were the centers of struggle for human rights during the military regime. Now we have a variety of special ministries and diaconal agencies operating at both national and international levels and engaging in the public advocacy for justice and peace. But there are churches not free from the danger of misusing the diaconal service as the opportunities of recruiting potential church members and often using the paternalistic approach without showing proper respect. So I think theological education needs to play a really crucial role in questioning their mindset and reminding them of the true spirit of diaconia as the expression of God's unconditional love and emphasizing the importance of unity in Christian service. And we need to provide the alternative paradigm, which is the ecumenical diaconia we are talking about. The discussion of ecumenical diaconia has important implications now when the world witnesses the radical new relations between North and South Koreas and between the USA and North Koreas. It is really good to replace the scary scenario of nuclear apocalypse with the talk of peace and prosperity. And I really do hope in the pursuit of the future prosperity, the principles of sustainable development goals and the ecumenical diaconia could have a real chance. American President Trump recently said that the North Korea will be a tremendous place within a very brief period of time. As a person living in South Korea who knows what the shadow of a high-speed, rapid economic development is like, I worry about this statement. So my prayer is that the future economic development in the North Korea could proceed in ways that respect and ensure the sanctity and dignity of each human being and protect the peoples and Earth's communities and make the celebration of life possible for all, especially for the most vulnerable people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reverend Yoon-Jo Bae, for this extremely valuable approach to it. Now we have Reverend Cora Matamoros from Nicaragua, and among ourselves, the Latin Americans, both in staff and Central Committee, we have a WhatsApp group. Who doesn't, huh? And Cora is the one who is hardest to find in this WhatsApp group to reply to us because Cora is always involved in some practical moments, work, and ministry that is related to land issues in Nicaragua. And this is the approach that I would like to hear from you on how the Moravian Church in Nicaragua is involved in that specific issue and how land is an important issue also in the SDGs agenda. And when Cora comes back to us on WhatsApp, it's always with very strong testimonies about the radical and extreme situations in which her church is dealing with in Nicaragua.
Muchas gracias, hermano Marcelo. En esta mañana para mí es un honor compartirle desde mi tierra indígena en Nicaragua, de donde vengo yo, participarle en la situación que el mundo quizás lo ve a través de las noticias, pero ahora estamos en persona presente acá en el Consejo Mundial, en su reunión, que es muy importante para deliberar en esta semana. En mi país, la situación territorial que viven los pueblos indígenas, hay dos momentos, porque el Pacífico y la costa atlántica. En el Pacífico nos difiere de que ellos fueron colonizados por los españoles y la costa atlántica fuimos colonizados por los británicos. Desde ese momento siempre tenemos que abordar estos dos momentos. La evangelización en el Pacífico de Nicaragua llegó a través de los católicos y en la costa atlántica a través de los protestantes, los moravos. Ya tenemos 167 años ahora. En medio de esto entonces está de que nosotros vivimos un momento colectivo en cuanto a nuestras tierras. Vivíamos un momento colectivo. En el Pacífico se vivía más privadamente, donde se exportaba el algodón, el café, la carne, el tabaco. Pero en la costa atlántica nosotros hemos sido más como que nos extrajo más lo que es la parte minera y lo que son nuestras culturas, nuestros bosques. En otro momento podemos también ver de que somos una cultura muy rica en lenguas y territorio. Somos un pueblo multiétnico, pluricultural en Nicaragua. De donde vengo yo, hablamos el mayagna, el misquito, el sumu, el ulua, garífono y, por supuesto, español, de donde han inmigrado. En medio de toda esta diversidad de cultura, estamos tratando de revitalizar lo que es la parte de la lengua ulua y garífono que está por terminar. En todo esto tenemos un camino de la autonomía también. En los 80 se aperturó el derecho de una autonomía en la ley que nos convierte en la ley 886. En esto en el 2028 podíamos realmente ver de que tenemos derecho a nuestras tierras, que tenemos libre derecho de formar territorios. Hasta el momento tenemos 23 territorios, otras pendientes por lograr su territorio. Esto implica que tenemos gobiernos regionales autónomos y territorios autónomos también, pero por supuesto siempre en el camino de la búsqueda del amor, la unión y el respeto de las tierras indígenas. Las tierras indígenas ha tenido que ver mucho desafío. Ha habido muchos problemas hasta el momento. Tenemos la invasión de colonos que se han apropiado de las tierras. Ha habido una comunicación muy mal a la cual personas tan humildes en el sector indígena han logrado vender sus tierras por un vaso de licor y desestabilizar su hogar y su familia. Ver los niños y niñas que sufren como consecuencia de este abuso de las tierras. Los colonos se han apropiado de muchas tierras. Ya el pueblo misquito, mayagna, ya no tiene el gozo en pleno de colectividad que vivía. Esto entonces nos conlleva a presentar algunos desafíos que consideramos que esta mesa y honorables miembros del Comité Central, invitados y de las Naciones Unidas, pueda retomar las voces de nosotros. En todo esto, la Iglesia Morava, de la cual vengo yo, no solamente nos vemos como iglesia, sino que tenemos un cuerpo de consejo pastoral a la cual nos unimos con todos ellos a una voz para poder elevar nuestra plegaria a Dios y nuestra plegaria a las sociedades internacionales, nacionales y el gobierno. Y hemos acompañado de una manera muy justa, tratando de hacer conciencia a los pastores y a los líderes de las comunidades lo que es el derecho de las tierras y qué es lo que produce a consecuencia de eso. Sin embargo, apenas estamos comenzando como iglesias. Necesitamos profundizarnos un poco en ello. Por tanto, como desafío, urge que el gobierno de Nicaragua haga valer la ley para que se respeten los derechos de los territorios indígenas y afrodescendientes hoy invadidos por colonos de otras regiones. Los enfrentamientos han alcanzado 34 muertos, entre ellos niños, niñas, 45 heridos, entre ellos mujeres violadas. Esto es en relación a la parte de los enfrentamientos de colonos y pueblos indígenas territoriales. Finalmente, queremos aterrizar con la situación actual que vive Nicaragua. Queremos presentar ante esta mesa que necesitamos la presencia de la Comisión Internacional de Derecho Humano que continúe la investigación sobre los muertos y hechos de violencia. También que sea invitado el Alto Comisionado de las Naciones Unidas para poder verificar y acompañar el proceso hacia una unidad, hacia una paz y por supuesto a los de la OEA también. Muchas gracias por escuchar esta ponencia.
Thank you. Thank you, Clara. Thank you very much. Son of Korean parents, Thomas was born and raised in Brazil. He's a young leader, used to be more young, but from the Lutheran Church, the Evangelical Church of the Lutheran Confession in Brazil. Thomas was a steward in the Porto Alegre Assembly in 2006. And in Busan, he not only was elected a member of the Central Committee, but also had the opportunity to visit his roots in Korea. Thomas, you come from a country where the ecumenical movement was raised upon what we are calling here a faith and rights-based approach to the issue of our willingness to live in a better world. Can you develop a little bit on that, taking into account the overall and strong influence that human rights agenda had in the creation of the ecumenical movement in Brazil?
Well, thank you. As Marcelo also knows, the ecumenical movement in Brazil, it grew hand in hand with the diaconal work. Mostly because in the beginning of the 1960s and the 1970s, there was a wave of military dictatorships in several countries in Latin America. And as the repression and torture and killings grew in those countries, the churches started to unite their voices against the abuse of human rights. So advocacy was a pillar of the diaconal work and of the ecumenical movement as a whole in Brazil. As military dictatorships started to fall down, the faith-based organizations that had its origins in this advocacy for human rights, this organization started to expand its view to a rights-based approach of development. So also in the context of the development studies, there was also a movement of leaving behind an idea of development based only upon income to an idea that encompasses a multidimensional approach. Like development is not only income, it's about education, it's about health, it's about everything else. That in the secular world, let us say. But for us, for the faith-based organizations, since we already had these roots on the rights-based development in a way, in the advocacy for human rights, we just have to extend that, the idea for other rights, not only the classical human rights, but also then education, social work, health, and so on. So for our organizations, it was an easy step to embrace this kind of multidimensional approach to development. And when we look then to what's going on with the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda, for our faith, for our churches and organizations, that's not a big step to do that. That's many. There are many commonalities. There are points of dialogue that churches and